everyone, Joe and I are here today to talk to you about courage, specifically using courage in coaching and what bold and courageous questions you can use to explore courage with your clients and to take your clients to a courageous place. So, where should we start, Joe?
Probably with this, let's define courage or give our version of that, or actually can draw on Susan A. David, who does a lot of work around emotional courage and vulnerability. She says courage is not the absence of fear, courage is fear walking.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really challenging thought for a lot of people. So rather than assuming that courage is the absence of fear, actually kind of making relationship with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the work that we do with clients around actions. And lately I've been talking about action more as courageous action rather than, so what actions are you going to take as a result of today? Like that's all quite, standard. I've been introducing this concept with my clients around what's the courageous action that you need to take here. Something that's just going to put them into stretch, into their learning edge, because I think everybody can commit to actions, but what's going to make the real big shifts is using courage. And I think for me, what I see, and I've experienced myself, is that if you don't take courage, if courage isn't actually part of your experience, you can feel a real lack of achievement. And we work with a lot of high achievers, don't we? And I think there's many high achievers that can cruise because they find a lot of things easy. And so you can forget that this factor around courage can really help you to feel passionate and engaged and motivated and proud of the work that you're doing. So I've been enjoying kind of exploring that concept around courageous action.
And I think we have a responsibility as coaches to model courage in the way that we partner with our clients, and that the clients can get strength from that relationship and the courage that exists within that. And for me, part of the joy of coaching is those, is partly those moments when I fully engage with my own courage, where in that split second of dancing in the moment, I'm deciding what question do I ask next, or where do I go next, or how do I change the energy that I bring to this. And I'm weighing up the rapport that I have with my client. And for me, courage shows up when I feel drawn to ask a question in service of them achieving their goal that is really holding the mirror up and maybe almost threatens in some way the rapport. So it can be right on the line, because stretching out of comfort into stretch can create resistance or shock, or for some people, that silence as people are processing can be really uncomfortable, especially if you're a newly qualified or a coach in training or a manager. So courage can be holding silence in the role of coach.
Yeah, and I think you need to contract for courage as well, don't you? So at the start of your relationships, particularly if you're going to be asking those, quite challenging, edgy questions, that's something that you and the client need to contract for and have permission for. And that's that support and challenge, kind of spectrum that we've talked about in previous videos around how challenging do you want your coach to be. But most clients that certainly in my experience, they want to be challenged. Like it's part of the dynamic of coaching. Like they are looking for their coaches to be courageous in the observations that they share and the feedback that they give. Like they want stretch and they want challenge. So I think courage as a skill as coaches is really important.
Yeah, they want a new way of looking at the world, experiencing the world. And you might need to spot contract, in the moment, where if you feel, and that can be enough to give you yourself permission to ask that courageous question, and just say, can I ask a challenging question? That's often something that I'll say. And if the rapport is there, the relationship is there with the client, they will always say, yes, go on, and it's that kind of nervous and excited feeling that they have around it. So you have to have the relationship there in the first place with the client, I think, to really get the benefits of bringing courage into the conversation. And you may ask your client, how courageous are you going to be? Are you willing to be in our sessions? So when it comes to types of questions that might be perceived as courageous to ask with clients, it obviously depends on the work that you're doing with your client, but some types of questions, some examples might be, you might be listening to your client telling you a story and they're really in the story and enthusiastic, and you might just kind of stop, bring a different energy and ask, what are you noticing right now? And that might be quite arresting and also quite liberating, but it can take courage to change the energy in a session as a coach.
Yeah.
Could ask a question around, what is your role in this? Or what are you resisting?
Yeah.
What voices or words have we still not heard? Because sometimes the client is so in their own head and their own experience that our role, when we then bring their attention to the other stakeholders in it, that can take a lot of courage, because they could perceive that to be, well, why aren't we talking about my experience? Why are we considering these other people? So that can be interesting.
I like the concept of the unsaids, so like, what haven't you told me yet? What are you not saying? And actually on my pre-coaching questionnaire, my very last question is, what have you not told me, that's important for our relationship? And it's always completed. People always put something in that box, which is useful. So yeah, definitely explore it. And that's courageous, because if they wanted to bring it in and it was easy to bring in, they'd have bought it. So it's really giving permission for the stuff which feels tougher and edgier to explore. I find using closed questions at the right time can be really bold. So if you have a client who's like talking about their story and what they want to achieve, your question might be, is that really what you want? And then they'll go and they'll tell you a bit more story, and you'll be, is that really what you want? So I like repeated closed questions. Basically force your client to take a position that they may be resisting inhabiting, and so persistent closed questions used well, because obviously you don't typically use them in coaching, can, as I said, introduce courage to your client to take their place, and decide.
The 5 whys can be very powerful with that as well. Use sparingly, but if you have the rapport, it can be a really good way to dig down. It's almost like, and then you find water, like when you're at the beach, and then it's like that euphoric breakthrough where they're like, that's really what this is all about. And then to just be able to hold that space and allow them to really understand what's happened for them in that moment. With my kind of grief work and training in mind, I often am thinking about situations with clients where I might ask them, what do you need to grieve for? So a lot of clients are in coaching, and there'll be things they need to let go of in order to embrace new things. And that process of endings and beginnings, they can get stuck within that. And who asks you, what do you need to grieve for? Or even acknowledges that that's part of the process. So that can take courage to ask that, because it's drawing their attention to something that generally the population aren't very comfortable talking about.
Yeah, and I think it's the same with, I don't know whether this is courage as such, because I think it's part of the work that we do as coaches, but naming the emotions, and staying in the emotions. So what are you feeling? What else? What's that like? How does that impact you? So having the courage to stay in the murk, I suppose, with your client, because that's where the clarity comes from, is really understanding, the current situation in the first place. So, the more you open up, particularly as new coaches and leaders, the more you open up the current situation, how someone's feeling, the more drawn, I think, at the beginning of your coaching you feel to trying to fix it. And that's really just not what coaching is about. So having the courage to unpack what is messy and to take a look at all the mess and just be like, okay, so where do you want to start? And putting it back over to your client, because half the time they don't need the solutions, they just need the space to actually really understand what's going on, and the solutions come naturally from that. So
it can take a lot of courage as a coach to sit with a client where if you ask them, what would you like to talk about today? And they say, I don't know.
yeah, that's true.
Like, I think that's one of the situations that requires the most courage and can happen most often. And you can fall into the trap of mentoring almost in that situation. So being aware of that, and when a client's talking about a situation, you might ask the question of how well is this represented in your life right now. If you're wondering how much congruency is there around this. So I think the summary is, actually, in many ways, all questions require courage, but what we need to bring as coaches is courageous curiosity.
Yeah.
And we need to invite our clients to meet us in that space of courageous curiosity. And that really is where the magic of that coaching relationship can ignite positive and sustained change.
Yeah. So hopefully some hints and tips and thoughts and things to reflect on there as you think about courage in your own practice or courage in your role as a leader. If you want to learn more about coaching and how to kind of develop your own courage, then come and join us in the coaching crowd if you're not here already, and check out our courses at www.igcompany.co.uk.